I'd like to thank everyone who watched my previous video for Galadriel and theme dissonance in Rings of Power. Thank you. With your support, we have pierced the algorithm together, and I will continue making content that will allow us to do so again. Now, onto our subject matter. There still remains something more I would like to talk about regarding Galadriel's character, and that is structuring tragic hero stories in successful ways. In Rings of Power, Galadriel is written as a tragic hero. Tragic heroes have flawed traits that directly lead to a tragic event in order to support a theme. For this video, I'm going to compare her as a tragic hero to another tragic hero that has already been adapted from Tolkien to the screen with great harmony with the themes. That character is Boromir from Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring, who serves as an excellent example of how to structure a tragic hero's arc and make it meaningful to the audience. Tragic heroes have tragic flaws, and the reason for this is that it is used to bring ruin upon a character to highlight an idea present in the story.
Without it, what am I to be?
Boromir is not initially introduced with the idea to be likable like many tragic heroes, but to emphasize his hubris, fearfulness over the future of Gondor, and his lack of wisdom that leads him to believe that the One Ring can give Gondor power. An hour before Boromir even appears on screen in Fellowship of the Ring, it has been building this idea about the corrupting nature of power through the Nine Nazgul's fate, through Gandalf's wisdom about the lies the ring tells, and on Elrond's account of Isildur, which he brings up the idea that the race of men cannot rely on each other, nor can they be relied upon. So as Boromir pleads to the council for the ring to be given to Gondor, Sauron whispers, "Doom of man."
The doom of man. It is a gift.
Clearly foreshadowing and defining Boromir's purpose within the film, utilizing his flawed belief that the One Ring can be wielded by man. This ties in neatly with themes that were already well established, allowing Boromir to ultimately be supported by that itself.
Desire power.
Similarly, Rings of Power starts off with Galadriel and makes her almost an entirely flawed character. She doesn't listen when multiple characters point out that the sigil that she wants to chase she is assuming to be made recent, and when she tries to justify her position to Elrond, she arrives at asking what is she without her sword, showing some internal conflict present. Recklessness, both with herself and those in her command, is the flaw that cuts through the most. By the end of episode 1, Gil-galad is established as kind of our prophet type character, and he foreshadows that if Galadriel remains in Middle-earth, she will inadvertently bring the return of Sauron. As she is conflicted between her goal of finding Sauron and returning to Valinor, the words "touch the darkness" ultimately lead her to stay in Middle-earth by diving into the darkness of the ocean, creating the conditions for Gil-galad's prophecy to take place. In the context of the structure, it would seem that touching the darkness is part of a flawed belief that foreshadows Galadriel's part in the return of Sauron. From this point, both of these characters are set up for their beliefs to drive them in a direction that brings catastrophe to their world. The development of a tragic hero is about how challenges and events are slowly pushing towards the character's fate, but also oftentimes is a place to establish sympathy and complexity for the character. Boromir's ends up working along two axes, his normal side and his weakness side. He develops a relationship with Merry and Pippin over the course of the movie where he takes on a guardian-type character role, helping them train, carrying them, and even showing empathy for their emotional well-being at a point. However, he also has to resist the ring in a scene, but neither the audience nor the other characters believe Boromir will continue to resist its call, so Boromir has this shadow looming over him. Galadriel's development ends up stretching her character in many wildly different directions. For example, one of her earlier challenges is receiving aid from the Queen Regent of Númenor to aid the Southlands. We know she's reckless in her goal, but she also reveals herself to be forceful, undiplomatic, and quite unreasonably bad with people, landing herself charged with sedition. I think the purpose is to say that she knows war but not people, but her judgment in these situations is so alien that it is hard to understand or even for the series to pull any real meaning from it. Eventually, this problem solves itself through the Tears of the Valar and we just move on from it. However, in Numenor, there is a development scene that brings focus back to her main internal conflict, and it's the conversation she has with Halbrand in his forge, in which the theme surrounding her belief finding the light requires touching the darkness is directly entered into the conversation, and it results in an ironic statement where she believes her soldiers and Elrond could not differentiate her from the evil she fights. This does seem to foreshadow that a moment of clarity is coming based on the tragic hero structure forming, because she is starting to understand part of herself but hasn't fully realized that the darkness is in her despite her guiding mantra being touch the darkness. Ultimately, though, it is just hard at this point to find many redeeming qualities in her, and self-clarity is the height of what we can expect after this conversation. There's usually this moment for a tragic hero where we see their disposition descending and we become aware that tragedy is imminent. Starting with Boromir, this moment is in Lorien. Boromir's fear ignites here, and he recounts that Galadriel tells him to have hope even though Gondor will fall, and he mentions that he cannot sleep in this place nor can he have hope. He speaks to Aragorn about the White Tower of Gondor and finds comfort and hope in him and Aragorn returning to Gondor someday. The shadow over Boromir becomes more visible here, but Boromir truly believes in Gondor and finds hope over his fears and companionship, a common theme within the film. Galadriel's dark descent is brought to the surface when she speaks to Adar with sheer brutality.
One day, before I drive my dagger into your poisoned heart, I will whisper in your piked ear that all your offspring are dead, and the scourge of your kind ends with you.
It would seem I'm not the only elf alive that's being transformed by darkness.
This is because it advances previous foreshadowing of Galadriel's tragic fate of the season and confronts Galadriel directly with her internal conflict. The idea isn't that she has simply touched the darkness anymore, but she is being transformed by it. It would seem that the show is building towards a catharsis moment, and we're inching towards it, with Galadriel seeming to be a bit in reflection afterwards. This is why I highlight about the need for Galadriel's realization to create change in her, because the show is building towards it, especially with this conversation. It's advancing the ideas present in episode 1. It's bringing Galadriel's perception of herself slowly more in line with what the audience sees in her. Climax and resolution are the heart and soul of a tragic hero, where decisions and flaws are confronted, leading to a conclusion for the character and themes. This is the most important part to discuss for Galadriel, as well as the messiest. Gil-galad's prophecy is complete. Galadriel has found Sauron and discovered she has been aiding his rise to power. She is tempted with power by Sauron, however there's a problem here. Galadriel's arc hasn't been about temptation or power. In fact, she undermines her power with her recklessness and tunnel vision towards her goal of stopping Sauron very often. It drops a lot of tension because the temptation is also counteractive to what she actually wants. Naturally, she denies Sauron's offer for power because she hates him. But does she actually deny the offer? For some reason, she decides a third ring should be made despite knowing these are part of dark magic that is important to Sauron. She decides this because it seems she's supposed to realize that power corrupts, but it's like we're missing a lot of support for her to reach this conclusion. There are no supporting scenes linking it to her development or catharsis for realizing that she's been deceived to aid her greatest enemy. The irony is that she has accepted Sauron's power over her externally and internally. Externally through the rings after knowing they're an important part of Sauron's plans, and internally by keeping Sauron's identity a secret, which is also what Sauron wants. It comes off like this is the climax and resolution for a different telling of Season 1 Galadriel. To illustrate this point, suppose hypothetically that Galadriel had instead discovered Sauron after the creation of the rings. Then suppose during their confrontation that Sauron uses her fear that if the elves leave Middle-earth, Sauron will conquer it. In this case, Galadriel would need to choose whether to tell about Sauron's identity and likely give up the power to stay in Middle-earth, or to keep it a secret believing she can stop Sauron. It doesn't change where it ended, but the point is, it makes a difference in meaning when you directly connect the climax and resolution to a character's conflicts, motivations, and themes.
All others look on you with doubt.
Let's contrast this with our other adaptation now. Boromir finally gives in to the temptation of the ring, succumbing and trying to forcefully take the ring from Frodo, causing the breaking of the Fellowship. This is the foreshadowed event and doom of man that Boromir's fear caused.
Oh! It is not yours, saved by unhappy chance. It could have been mine. It should be mine. Give it to me!
However, the resolution itself has a far more forward-progressing tone. Those guardian traits that Boromir showed earlier come back as he dies defending Merry and Pippin. Ultimately, he falls and Merry and Pippin are taken, showing that despite his intentions, he cannot undo what he has set in motion. He confesses what he did to Aragorn, and Aragorn forgives him, providing closure and comforting Boromir for the last time as he promises Boromir to not let Gondor fall. Boromir's foreshadowed betrayal for power serves as support for the concepts of power and corruption ever present in Fellowship of the Ring, but it also leads into using the main theme of Fellowship to resolve other characters' conflicts, and that is the choices we make despite our circumstances.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
Frodo and Aragorn make their difficult choices in the breaking of the Fellowship, going their separate ways. Everyone in the Fellowship ultimately is bound to this theme of circumstance and choice. Despite Boromir causing his and the Fellowship's tragic circumstances, he is simultaneously understandable and pitiable in his catharsis. He is aware of his wrongdoing by the end and instead places hope in Aragorn, not the power of the ring, a complete progression of his character, and he dies heroically of his own choosing, despite his traits that made him susceptible to the manipulation of the ring. Now, ultimately, the reason I compared Galadriel to Boromir is in how the structure of their tragic arcs differ and how their flaws are presented, how it connects to a specific or even multiple themes, and most critical, how their tragedy is resolved. In Galadriel's case, it feels like Galadriel is thrown in too many directions throughout the entire season. Main progression moments put her flaws front and center without much attention given to any redeeming qualities. Gradually, it is acknowledged the idea that she is more troubled than she thinks, but then it doesn't resolve it or attempt to provide any closure, making it difficult to understand her actions in the resolution. Contrast this with the tragic arc of a supporting character whose hubris would break apart the Fellowship, but manages to find heroism and hope in his darkest moment when he finally understands his own flaw and how it manages to connect Boromir's arc with the greater themes present in Fellowship of the Ring.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.